Your metabolism is the sum of all the chemical reactions occurring in your body. So every organism has a metabolism. And metabolic pathways, P-A-T-H-W-A-Y-S, are a series of chemical reactions that either build complex molecules or break down complex molecules. So a pathway is a series of metabolic reactions occurring in a cell. In this diagram right here, this is called a pathway. I have a hard time writing for some reason. And when a substrate is converted into a product, that is a reaction. So therefore, this arrow right here represents reaction 1. And in cells, every reaction is catalyzed, or you can think of it as performed by a specific enzyme. So enzyme 1 is going to catalyze reaction 1, and the substrate is going to be converted into some product. And then this product is then going to serve as the substrate or reactant in the second reaction. And it's going to be converted into some other product. So reactant or substrate is converted into products. And these are called intermediates because they're not the final product. And that's catalyzed by enzyme 2. And then in the final reaction in this pathway, reaction 3, enzyme 3 is going to catalyze whatever this product is from reaction 2 into the final product. And in real metabolic pathways, it could be up to 1,000 different reactions, and one pathway can branch into multiple different pathways depending on what enzymes are active and what products are needed and not needed inside of the cell. So it gets very complex, but just understand that your metabolism usually isn't just one single reaction, but multiple reactions, all making products that will be used in the next reaction to make a different product, and so on and so on and so on. And so if you want to have this intermediate, for example, be your final product, then enzyme 3 would get turned off, inactivated, and therefore it would not be able to convert this intermediate into its final product. So this would be the final product. All right, so you can divide your metabolism into 2 categories, catabolic reactions and anabolic reactions. Catabolic reactions release energy by breaking down complex molecules, and this gets a little bit more complicated in chemistry, but in a simplified form for biology, just understand it like that. And anabolic reactions overall are reactions that consume energy in order to build more complex molecules from simpler compounds. So catabolic reactions release energy, anabolic reactions consume energy. So diagram showing the coupling of an anabolic reaction with a catabolic reaction in cells. So for a catabolic reaction, we're going to draw, for example, a disaccharide, which you should know what that is by now. Just 2 monosaccharides bonded together. Technically, there's an oxygen atom in between there, but let's just say it's just 2 molecules bonded together to make a large molecule. And then in the catabolic reaction, that bond is broken. So now we have 2 monosaccharides. And an overall release of free energy is put into the system. So we're going to say plus free energy. So breaking bonds, again, this is simplified, but releases free energy that cells can then use. Okay, so this is a catabolic reaction. So let's say we need to do an anabolic reaction. The cell needs to build something. So it needs to take this square and it needs to bond it with another square molecule. Well, in order to form this bond, there needs to be an input of free energy. So therefore, plus free energy. And that free energy is going to come from the energy released from catabolic reactions. So first, let's draw our product. And I want you to understand that this energy that's released in catabolic reactions will be used in anabolic reactions. So the energy you're releasing in your digestion reactions are going to be used in your anabolic reactions to build things like proteins and phospholipids and DNA, things that you need to build inside of your cell. Okay, so in living systems, catabolic reactions are coupled with anabolic reactions to build new molecules such as DNA, proteins, triglycerides, phospholipids, and polysaccharides. All molecules that you learned about. In order for them to be built in cells, they need an input of free energy to form those bonds. And the free energy comes from catabolic reactions, which are also occurring inside of your cells. So practice question, which of the following reactions is a catabolic metabolic pathway? A, the synthesis of a DNA strand from free-floating nucleotides using an input of cellular energy, or B, the hydrolysis of DNA into individual nucleotides releasing free energy. So catabolic means to take a molecule and break it down into simpler products, releasing free energy. So pick your answer. Therefore, the answer is B. A would be classified as anabolic. The word synthesis is always going to be anabolic. All right, so in cells, energy can be defined as the ability to do work, and organisms need a continual input of free energy in order to do work and therefore survive and function. And a loss of this continual energy input is going to result in cell death and organism death. And energy can be divided into, or can be categorized into different forms. And one form is kinetic energy. And kinetic energy is associated with motion. And an example of that would be like thermal energy, the movement of atoms or molecules. And then we have potential energy. And that is going to be stored energy. And so chemical energy, like for example, energy in food molecules like carbohydrates, is going to have energy stored in the bonds. So potential energy available for release in a chemical reaction is what chemical energy is. And so again, for simplicity's sake, I want you to think of, like, for example, this covalent bond right here between these two carbon atoms represents two shared electrons between these two carbon atoms. And when that bond is broken, the electrons are released and can get added to another molecule. So therefore, that represents energy. So electrons. So first, let's say covalent bond. And what that is stored chemical energy. And then when bond is broken, the electrons, or you can think of it as energy, is released. Okay. So the study of energy transformations in matter is called thermodynamics. And the first law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred or transformed. And so in this example with the squirrel, there is potential energy in the nut, and so that's chemical. So the energy in the bonds of the biomolecules in the nut is storing that energy. and the squirrel will perform cellular respiration and release that stored energy and ultimately convert it into kinetic energy, which will allow the squirrel to leap into the air as seen in this picture. The second law of thermodynamics is that during energy transformations, it's not 100% efficient, and therefore energy transformation increases the entropy or disorder of the universe. During energy transfers or transformation, some energy is unusable and often lost as heat, dissipated heat energy out of the system. Because organisms are continually increasing in entropy and converting usable energy into heat energy, which dissipates from their body and is an unusable form, they need a new constant supply of usable energy in order to survive or in order to maintain homeostasis. So what I mean by that is this squirrel is taking usable energy and ultimately converting it into kinetic energy to perform functions. And a lot of that kinetic energy is heat energy that's being kind of released from its body, and therefore it's lost that usable energy. So it's going to need more energy to maintain its growth and homeostasis. Loss of usable energy input is going to mean that the organism is going to have increased disorder and therefore cell and organism death. What this means is if you're not continually eating or giving yourself usable energy, then you're not going to have the energy to perform anabolic reactions to build molecules needed for cell growth and function, like proteins and phospholipids. And so without this free energy that you get, you are just going to have cells become highly disorganized and just result in increased entropy or death. So here we have a highly ordered system that needs a constant input of free energy to maintain, but the natural progression of things is things get more and more spread out and more disordered, and that's called the law of entropy. What organisms do is they fight entropy in order to stay alive. So what did I want you to write here? So the natural progression is towards entropy and therefore towards death. But life takes in energy to maintain order and, in essence, fight entropy. However, when organisms stop obtaining usable energy, then they are not going to be able to fight entropy and they're going to die. So when these flowers are no longer able to photosynthesize because they've been cut from their plant, lack of photosynthesis means lack of sugar. Lack of sugar means lack of cellular respiration. Lack of cellular respiration means lack of free energy used to build molecules necessary to keep this plant alive and functioning. So therefore, cell death and organism death. Also, exergonic reactions are reactions that release free energy. And an example of exergonic reactions in cells is cellular respiration. And in exergonic reactions, because you're releasing free energy, the products are going to have less potential energy than the reactants. And this is going to be true for all catabolic reactions. And so now what I want to do is go back to, people are walking in here, go back to this diagram right here. So catabolic reactions, there is more potential energy in this larger molecule, this reactant, than in the products because free energy was released. And energy is never created nor destroyed, so therefore that means that this must have had more energy than these reactants if free energy is released. So therefore for catabolic, we're going to write exergonic. And then for anabolic, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be endergonic. Hold on one second. Okay, so what does endergonic mean? Endergonic reactions are reactions that consume energy or require an energy input. And the example of endergonic you need to know is photosynthesis. And in endergonic reactions, the products are going to have more potential energy than the reactants. And this is going to be true for any anabolic reaction. So going back to these diagrams, here in the catabolic reaction, the reactant has more potential energy because it has more covalent bonds in this larger, more complex molecule. Here, the product is larger and more complex, and this free energy right here is now used to form those bonds. So now this has greater potential energy product, where here these products have less potential energy than the reactant that was used to make the products. So catabolic reactions release energy, and therefore the products have less potential energy. Anabolic reactions consume energy, and therefore that more complex product has greater potential energy. And again, for biology, I want you to think of potential energy or chemical energy as energy in covalent bonds. So the more covalent bonds a molecule has, the greater its potential energy. Okay. So living cells have a constant flow of materials in and out of the membrane, and therefore cells are not at equilibrium. Hold on. So cells are performing three kinds of work. The first kind is mechanical, which would be, for example, movement like the beating of cilia, the movement of chromosomes and mitosis, the contraction of muscle cells, transport. So any type of active transport is going to be cellular work. And then chemical. So any type of anabolic reaction where we're synthesizing molecules, that is going to require energy. That is considered work. So all of these require energy. Okay, so the main energy currency in cells is adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is a molecule that organisms use as a source of energy to perform work. And this is the molecular structure of ATP. It's a nucleotide that has adenine covalently bonded to a ribose, covalently bonded to 3 phosphate groups. And these phosphate groups are all negatively charged. Negative charges repel each other. So therefore, this molecule is highly unstable. And it also has a lot of potential energy. So these covalent bonds right here, when they are broken, lots of potential or lots of free energy is released. So how ATP works is it is going to couple endergonic or exergonic reactions to endergonic reactions to power cellular work. So it's going to allow that coupling of catabolic to anabolic reactions. So when ATP is used, it is technically hydrolyzed into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, plus an inorganic phosphate. We call it P subscript I, or inorganic phosphate. because it is no longer attached to the organic adenosine. It's no longer attached to that organic biomolecule. And when it releases this phosphate right here, this phosphate will attach to a molecule, usually a protein, and phosphorylate it. And now the protein's going to have a conformational shape change, and it's going to cause it to be able to do cellular work. So this is called phosphorylation. The released phosphate moves to another molecule to give it energy. So we're going to diagram ATP hydrolysis. So we're going to do a shorthand. So draw like a rectangle for adenosine, and then just do 3 phosphates bonded to each other. And they're all negatively charged. So ATP is highly unstable. That's why it can't be bottled up and like sold in a pharmacy. It's built and used inside of cells quickly. So when ATP is hydrolyzed, this third bond is going to be broken or hydrolyzed. So ATP is going to be broken into, and an enzyme and water is going to be needed to perform this, into ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. So it's lost that third phosphate, plus the inorganic phosphate, which represents free energy that's going to be used to power some cellular process. Now, ATP, when it's broken down like this, it's not going to be able to continually be used to power cellular processes. So we're going to have to regenerate ATP so it can continually break off that third phosphate and phosphorylate other molecules. So when ATP is regenerated, it's going to be the reverse of this reaction. We're going to take ADP, and then we're going to add an inorganic phosphate. I don't know why I made it all giant. And in order to bond this phosphate to ADP, that bond is going to require free energy, so plus free energy. This is anabolic. And that free energy is going to be used to bond that third phosphate to ADP to create or regenerate ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And there's a lot of free energy needed to bind this phosphate because, like I said, phosphates are negatively charged. And so to bond another negatively charged functional group to something that's already negatively charged, it's like 2 magnets that don't want to come together. So lots of free energy is required to do that. Where does this free energy come from? The main catabolic reaction in cells, which is cellular respiration. So it comes from cellular respiration, which is a catabolic exergonic reaction. So ATP regeneration is going to be anabolic. And then ATP hydrolysis is going to release energy and therefore be catabolic. Okay, that is it for these notes. Thank you and goodbye.